Hey, it's Kevin Hunter and Davis McAlister back with you. We're going to do a little bit deeper dive into his latest book, The Success by Design. And so fascinating subject to me, right? Because I think as we go through life, we have to understand that we have to be intentional, right? So help me understand maybe just maybe first couple chapters or what kind of beginning of the book and kind of the path that this book leads you down.
So the approach that I took with this is the first thing that you really have to do is figure out, why are you here? And that comes down to finding your purpose. You know, why did God put you here to begin with? You know, what purpose do you serve in the greater scheme of things? And so there's a concept that I put in there that I call EKG. So an EKG, by medical terms, is an electrical activity of the heart. It's a measure of the electrical activity of the heart. So what I do with this, as far as this concept, is that you're giving yourself a heart check. Right? So the E stands for excitement. You know, what gets you excited? You know, and when I talk about excited, I'm talking about, you think about, depending on what kind of household you grew up in, when you got up on Christmas morning and you knew that there was going to be presents under the tree, or something along those lines, that level of excitement, what gets you excited, and really kind of drives you like that. And then the next part of it is then you want to look at, the K is knowledge. What are you knowledgeable about? What have you invested yourself in? What do you have your education? What's your background in? What's your experience in? And how does that tie into the things that you're excited about? And then the G part is your gifts. Do you know what your gifts are? Do you have, a good comprehensive understanding of what gifts you bring to the table? So, for example, the ability to teach. I had a coach that I interviewed with. It was my first coaching job. Did an interview with the coach, and he came in. His son actually ended up becoming a famous football player in the NFL.
Anybody we can talk about?
Yeah, my first coach was under Mike Beasley. That was who I.
Oh, wow.
And it was Cole Beasley's dad in Little Elm. And so, when I went in to do my interview with him, he found out that I played a little bit of college ball and things like that. And one of the things that he said to me in that interview was really profound. And at the time, I was kind of like, it didn't make sense. But the further along that I got and working with kids and teaching and even getting up in front of people and speaking and all those things, it was very, very true. He said, just because you could play it doesn't mean that you can coach it.
Right.
You have to have the ability to be able to take what you know and be able to transfer it to somebody so that they understand it the way you understand it.
Yeah.
And be able to communicate. And it's a gift to do that. So those are kind of the things that I'm talking about. Do you have a gift to teach? What is your gift? Are you really good with your hands? You can put a basketball in my hand. That basketball is worth about $15.
Yeah.
But you take that same basketball and put it in the hands of somebody like Michael Jordan, that ball is worth a whole lot more money.
Different
at that
result,
point.
yeah.
It's a different result. So, but it's based on the gifts that we have.
Right.
And then there's a difference. People kind of mix this up. They mix up what their purpose is and then what they're doing in life. So your purpose is the why. The mode, what I call the mode is the how. How are you implementing it? How are you carrying out? And you could equate to that to, your job or however, you have a purpose and then you're doing things through real estate. So you're carrying your purpose out through the mode of real estate.
Right.
I do things, I have a purpose, but then I carry that purpose out either through doing chiropractic work, or I do that purpose through getting up in front of people and teaching.
Yeah.
And so that's the mode that we're talking about. And then when I get into the next chapter, we talk about passion. Because a lot of people try to take that passion, they overlap it. That's what you equate to the excitement. And it's really not the same thing. Passion is the energy that drives your purpose and the mode that you do it in. And so it's three elements, and a lot of times people just try to overlap them, and they're not. There's three separate elements, but you got to understand how they fit together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was talking to my daughter, 15-year-old, right? So typical, everything you say kind of falls on deaf ears. And I said, hey, look, at one point I was your age, right? And I was listening to my parents and really really thought they didn't know what they were talking about, right? But life has this amazing gift of helping you understand that they actually did know what they were talking about. And as you grow, you start having different experiences and you mature, then some of these paths that they tried to lead me down ended up making a lot more sense, right? And so when you talk about purpose, I mean, just like a lot of teenagers, like some teenagers kind of have it figured out. I didn't, right? I was just kind of all over the map, and they were really trying to help me kind of narrow down some of those paths and be less exploratory on what they felt like were going to be dead ends for me. But when you're young, you have to kind of learn by experience sometimes. So Twitter, really what I like about your book is finding your purpose, right? And you're not going to find it as a 15-year-old, but as you go through life and you start rehearing some of those voices of the past that you kind of resisted, and they were right? And they were talking about purpose, and they were talking about what are you going to be passionate about, right? And how can you turn that passion and kind of morph it with your gift, and then have a real purpose in life.
That's your starting point. I mean, those are the foundational things that you have to have in place first, because then you start carrying on to the other parts of it with, patience. You got to have patience because, another one of the things that I put in there is also understanding that there's a process to everything, and you have to endure a process. It's very rare that somebody just automatically just jumps into something and, takes off. I read a article that not too long ago was talking about the actor Jason Statham. So he got his first acting job when he was working on the streets as a sideshow kind of con man type personality. And the first movie that he was in, the director was walking through this area of town in London and was looking for kind of material and ideas of what he thought a con man should be, and he came across Jason Statham. And
he was actually a con man.
He was actually a con man at the time. Had actually done prison time. And ended up saying, "Hey, I want to put you in a movie," and that's how his career got started. I mean, you think about it from that standpoint, and then the people that have spent years and years and years studying acting and acting school, and I mean, those instances are so rare that happens. Everything else, there's a process that you got to go through. And when I talk about the process, though, it's a learning process. There's things that you're always going to learn. When I started trying to get into the speaking business, I really didn't know, even how to put together a presentation. There's an art to that. There's specific things and specific ways you've got to do that. And those are things you have to learn. So that's part of that process. And then how do you find event planners? And, these are all those things that requires a process. And so you have to be patient to go through the process. And then, there's always going to be a price to pay as well. And then when we talk about price, it's not necessarily monetary. It can be time. That sometimes it means that as you move up and your mindset changes, your energy levels increase, and the people that may have started with you, they may not be with you on the next stage of your journey. And sometimes there's a price to pay for that. And are you willing to pay the price to be able to keep moving forward?
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because when you struggle in life, it's really kind of the measure of a person to see what their perseverance can be, right? Because you're always going to have struggles. You're always going to kind of skin your knee a little bit. And one of my favorite sayings is, it's not whether you fall down, it's whether you get back up, right? And so in kind of the microwave society where people want immediate results, and everything is available at the tip of your fingers, right? On a phone, you can order things. Amazon will get it to you the same day, right? It's just, I don't even have to get in my truck and drive to Best Buy anymore, right? I mean, I can literally go online and it's there within hours. It's crazy. But I was thinking today that, when you begin a career or when you feel like you found your purpose, you feel like, okay, great. Well, this is easy. Here we go. And then you come through some trials and tribulations. You're like, well, maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing this. Maybe this wasn't my gift, right? And then as you kind of plow through some of those barriers
Mhm.
and you fight through some of that resistance and you overcome some of those hurdles, it's interesting when you realize, okay, I was supposed to learn from this,
Yeah.
right? What are the takeaways? And now I'm better than I was, yesterday and the week before and the month before. So these little challenges that really kind of discourage you if you just kind of stay calm, right?
Yeah.
And realize this is my purpose, this is what I should be doing, and stay focused on that.
Yeah.
Then it's amazing the kind of success you can have, and you kind of laugh and you look back and you're like, boy, I was really struggling. That was hard.
Yeah.
And now that you've progressed to a certain point and you've managed to overcome, and you're better at your craft, or you're better at whatever you're wanting to improve in, right? It could be relationships. It to me is amazing that if you can just have a little determination and not give up at the first sign of adversity, then yeah, I mean, find your purpose, align with it, and then just kind of be determined, right? And just and have that kind of grateful attitude that, like, okay, this is a really difficult situation, but I'm going to learn a lot from this.
Yeah.
When I get to the other side, I'm going to be a much better dad, right? Friend, realtor, by having gone through these trials and tribulations.
Yeah. I mean, and when I say this, I don't mean this to come across as a pessimistic point of view, because I don't see it that way.
Yeah.
But in life, you're always in one of three situations. You're always going into a problem, you're in the middle of a problem, or you're coming out of a problem.
Right.
And it's all part of our growth process. When people find themselves in a position where they keep experiencing the same thing over and over again, and they can't figure out why, the reason it's real simple is you didn't learn what you were supposed to learn the first time that you encountered that situation. So you're going to get put through that again, and it's what I call going around the block. You're going to go around that block again until you finally learn your lesson. Then you're going to get to go to the next block. And so eventually, over time, you start building a foundation of blocks, right, that kind of lays the foundation for other problems that start to come, that you start to develop and grow out of. These two blocks down here may be contributing to solving this problem up here. And eventually, you continue to build those blocks. And that's what I refer to from a spiritual standpoint, is this is how the temple is built within you. Because, you continue to build those blocks, and you have a wall, and then that wall turns into, a frame, and then, eventually you end up with a full building.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write this book?
I had a lot of people that looked at my process that I went through, and going from being homeless as a teen, then I went in the military to escape that situation. And after a time in the military, I found myself, I'm like, okay, I really don't want to continue to do this the rest of my life. So, and there were some things that were going on in the military at the time that I made the decision to go ahead and get out and go to school. And problem is, when I got out to go to school, really had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But had no idea. I started going to school. My first major was, international business, and I started taking the business classes and had to take a political science class, and I hated every bit of it. I'm like, okay, this is not what I want to do. And so, so there was this process that I had to go through to kind of figure out, because while I had more confidence in who I was, and I had a work ethic and discipline and all these other things, really didn't know what it was that I could do. I didn't know what my gifts were. And so I had to go through this process of trying to figure out what that was, and then build a knowledge base. And it's funny, if you look at my resume, I've had people tell me that it looks more like a shotgun blast of things, because there's so many different things that I've done. Most people, you look at the resume and it's very linear, as they progress from one thing to the next, and mine is not. It's, all over the place. But I've been able to take all those experiences and merge them into a single package that, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm gonna find a way. It's what I call, you're gonna bloom where you're planted. And so I wanted to write this because I know that if I struggled with it, there's got to be other people out there that have kind of struggled with this, and it doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I was finally in my, I was in almost 30, in my early 30s by the time I started figuring out, the direction that I wanted to go. And even still then, there's so many things that I've learned over the last 20 years that I've had to grow from, and directions and things that I've been kind of pushed in different directions on, and experiences that I've gotten to go, that sense of purpose and a sense of success is not defined necessarily by monetary means. It's what have you overcome? What have you been able to put behind you? What have you had to learn? What have you had to unlearn? And that whole concept then is what I see as success. And I think we've talked about this before, but there's kind of 4 phases that I went through when I talk about success. So you have success for survival, because it's either you survive or you die.
Yeah.
And then you go into a process where, okay, well, these people said I'll never make it, so I'm going to prove them wrong. So that's what I call survival by rebellion. And then you kind of get through that process, and then you get to a point where you're just, okay, I'm just going to succeed for the sake of succeeding. But there's really no meaning behind it. And then finally you progress to success for a purpose. And that's what I wanted people to take this with is, that's why I start off, help you find your purpose, figure out what your purpose is, and then progress from there. That way you go straight into a success for purpose type mode. And so that was the reason why I wrote the book.
Yeah. So some good takeaways there. You mentioned that you were potentially starting to write another book. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my next book, I've already written the first 2 chapters on. I've got this one's shaping up to be about a 10-chapter book. They all seem to kind of be about the same size.
Yeah,
but
easily digestible, right?
Yeah,
this is a book that a couple days in, over the weekend, you can you can start taking the lessons immediately.
Yeah, and that's my thing too. Is when I write a book, I want it to be easily digestible. I want it to be something that's easily absorbed. You don't have to go find a dictionary to look up the words in there. But I know myself as well. When I sit down to start reading a book, if a book's too big, the majority of people are going to lose interest about halfway through the book if they even make it that far. And so I try to keep my books to where, when you start it, I want you to be able to finish it.
Yeah.
And usually the size that I'm writing these is about the attention span that most people have to be able to get through a single book. The next book that I'm working on is transformational versus toxic leadership. And over the years, I've had some really, really great examples of leadership. I've had some just really, really awful examples of leadership. And I really don't even call that leadership. It's just more bad management. And then a lot of varying degrees in between. I've had, some people that I've worked for that there were certain things that I really didn't like about them, but there were other things that were absolutely great about them, and so that's what I want to dive into this book. The whole book is basically a cross comparison between the 2 traits as we go through different elements. And we talk about things like empathy. There's a fine line, especially when you're in charge of people, that you need to be empathetic to the people that you're trying to supervise and lead and all those things. But at the same time, sometimes you got to draw a line in the sand and be able to have some critical conversations. And how do you have those critical conversations and be able to walk away with it? And it's not always easy. You're not always going to be able to walk away with, everybody feeling good about it. But you want to try to minimize the impact on those things. And, there's a right way and a wrong way to handle those situations. So,
some of my favorite leaders have had like this perfect balance, or maybe not perfect, but the really amazing balance of empathy and accountability, right? So it's one thing to empathize with someone and understand, okay, hey, I totally get that, right? You're struggling, you've done this has happened. Let's work through that, right? But then coming up with a clear roadmap and say, okay, but here are the metrics, right? Here are the benchmarks that we want to see, right? Totally get where you're coming from. I'm totally empathetic in your situation, but let's move away from there and let's move forward and let's turn this around and have some positive results.
So. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's kind of the process. And I know that, I did a little bit of background research on statistics, and, one of the things that I found was that 77% of business owners and employees feel like that there's a lack of leadership within an organization. 77% of businesses. Yet, if you go through and you look at most conferences, corporations that have their own conferences or all these different things, one of the top things that they're looking for is people that talk about leadership. Yet it's still a problem. And so what I want to do is try to find a way to put a formula together to where it's easily digestible, but it's not just in the workplace, because a lot of the things, that I put in there could easily be applicable to your home life.
Yeah.
Dealing with your kids, dealing with your spouse. And so it has to be a life change, to be able to adapt these things,
Right.
rather than just a business setting. Because I've seen some people that were really, really great in business, but when you look at their home lives, it was a train wreck.
Yeah.
Or you have people that, that have really, really great home lives, but, they can't keep up with a bank account, much less anything else. So it's about creating that balance. And, you have to be able to have leadership within yourself. And so it's about self-leadership, self-accountability, and then being able to take those things and then project out from there.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you speak at conferences. What are you, obviously you're probably going to understand your audience and kind of morph your message to them. What is the message that you usually try and deliver to your audiences when you are speaking at these conferences?
So I've got two primary keynotes that I do. My first keynote is talking about success. And what I do is I share my background. I share everything that I went through, going from being a kind of a lost homeless teen to, things that I had to progress through and work through in the military, and the mind shifts that I had to make, and all the things that I walked away from that with. Some of that's reflected in the book. Some of it is things like, learning to understand what resiliency is, and, motivation, self-motivation, determination, and all those things that I've learned. So when I get up and I talk about those things, it's meant to be motivational, and hopefully inspirational, but also get people to kind of stop and look at their own lives, and how do you use the experiences that you've gone through to be able to move forward and help other people move forward.
Yeah.
And that's one of my keynote talks that I do. The other one that I do, I've actually put the presentation together before I wrote the book. A lot of people go the other way around.
Yeah.
I've got the presentation. Now I'm writing the book for the presentation. And it's the transformational versus toxic leadership. I'm talking about different leaders, and I use all these real stories that happened, and things that I've gone through. And some of the stories are really funny. Some of them are like, I can't believe that actually happened.
Wow.
But and hopefully there's some entertainment value with it. But I want people to walk away with it thinking a little differently.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, this is the book. In case you haven't seen it here it is again. Go out and get it. It's an amazing read. Like I said, it's very brief. You can immediately start applying some of the principles and some of the thought behind it. And then come see him speak. Great speaker, motivational. It's a timeless message about accomplishment and kind of creating that path and being very purposeful to get there. So thanks for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you guys again soon.